And then if I do this, you guys can see the presentation.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, so Rusty, please start the recording.
Yeah, we are ready.
Yes. Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much to everybody who's joined us tonight. We're going to be starting this webinar right now. And in this webinar, we have a special guest speaker coming in and talking all about dental technology and helping us get a better understanding of the dental lab profession. So what do registered dental technologists do? I wanted to quickly go over what they do. And basically, they use a variety of specialized tools, techniques, and materials and technologies to produce bridges, crowns, dentures, implants, and many of the tools that are used in the dentistry profession. And in other words, RDTs work hand in hand with dentists to provide optimal care for patients. So this is definitely like a really interesting field that I personally have a lot of interest in. And Mr. Michaelino is going to explain a lot more about this today with us. So how do you become an RDT? For someone to become an RDT, you need to have the following qualifications. Firstly, you need to have a high school diploma or a GED, and you also need to have a certification from an accredited 3-year dental laboratory technician program. And there's also an optional bachelor's degree program in dental technology, but most likely it's just a dentition certification that's required by you. And Mr. Lino is going to talk more about this as well with you. So I'm going to pass the stage over to Michael Lino. He's going to talk more about everything related to dental lab tech, and he's been working with Shaw Lab Group for over 20 years now. Thank you so much, Michael, for coming and joining at our webinar today, and I'm passing it over to you.
No problem. You can see my screen okay?
Yes.
So yes, my name is Michael Lino. So I went to George Brown College. That's where I did my 3 years of schooling in order to become an RDT. I became a registered dental technologist at the age of 21. Probably during that time was probably one of the youngest RDTs. I've been working for Shaw Toronto for the last 20 years. I started very young, because, well, I'll explain a little bit later, but my family was already in the profession, and I started in school before, working at Shaw before I went to George Brown and went to school, which gave me a bit of a head start while I was doing the program. Usually you don't start working in a lab until your 3rd year doing co-op. I've also been working in different capacities for the CDTO, which is the College of Dental Technicians of Ontario. Essentially what they're doing is that is our government, our body, our college that regulates us and our profession. I've also lectured at the University of Toronto, just an in-person lecture. And we're probably one of the largest labs in Eastern Canada right now. And I've been managing the lab. And I had my career kind of progressed from basic entry up to where I am now. So this is our lab. We have 4 locations. Shaw GTA is our main one. It's about 85 technicians, maybe about 95 people in total. That's not technicians working at our location. Shaw Kingston is our other lab, Shaw Ottawa, and Shaw London. In this business, there are different size and different capacities, smaller labs versus larger. This is considered one of the, like as I said, a larger lab for our industry. Most labs, you're talking about 10, 12 people. Some labs can be as small as 1 or 2 people that are running it. So what is dental technology? Dental technology is our profession. Not a lot of people know what we do. Essentially, what we're doing is we work with dentists, and we work only by prescription, meaning we do not work with the public. We don't see patients. Sometimes a doctor will send a patient for us to take a shade. which is the color of the teeth. But essentially patients are not, we only work by prescription. So sort of like a pharmacist, they can only prescribe medication with a prescription. It's the similar thing. We can only prescribe a prosthesis or appliance with a doctor's prescription and what to do. So most of you probably have seen impressions and been to the dental office. You know, I mean, with the newer technologies, it's digital now, but there's still a lot of doctors using just traditional impressions. And what essentially what they do is when they take this impression, they send it, they box it, write up a prescription, send it to the lab. The lab pours models, and it's basically stone. So it's kind of like baking. You're mixing stone, water, it's plaster and water, pour it into the impression, and you have a copy of what the patient has in the mouth. And with that copy is where we can actually start making an appliance. So some things we make is like crown and bridge. So when the tooth is prepped, so let's say this tooth is either can fall out, or maybe there's a cavity that needs to be prepped. And when I say prep, is means you trim the tooth away and you leave a core or just the root scenario on it. And from that, you can make a crown or a bridge on it that replaces your teeth. And I'll go into details later about what exactly that entails. The other thing we do is implants. So instead of doing crown and bridge, there's an option of placing an implant, which looks like a big screw in the bone. And then you can place this restoration on top of it, and it screws down in. The other thing is orthodontic appliances. So you might be familiar with this. It's if you ever had braces and then you have a retainer that you have to go into. Another thing is a lot of people are grinding their teeth, especially now. We make night guards for that. We also make bleaching trays, but all sorts of orthodontic appliances that would be fabricated by the lab technician. The other thing is dentures. So when a patient has lost a lot of teeth, either there's a partial denture or it could be full dentures. That is all made by us as well. So just, this is just a little thing that we live by. Dentistry in general is art. It's very creative. It's very, from what a dentist does chairside to what we do in the lab, it's fabricating something, and it's something that's beautiful, gorgeous. It's something that we work together to fabricate. And our mission at the end of the day is to change lives. Like every day we work together with our dental professionals to restore the joy of eating and smiling. So this is a video that I'm going to play, and I'm going to show you what a dental lab looks like. And there might be points that I stop the video, or I might let it. I'm just going to be talking over top of it. But again, it'll give you an idea of different departments and what we're doing. So I'll kind of run through that for you. So this is our lab, our new location. So customer service department. So in here, what happens is we get shipments throughout the day. Usually a lot in the morning, but throughout the day we start getting boxes, and it's these blue boxes you'll see here. These are coming from the dental office, and inside that box will be a prescription and an impression or models. And what this person's doing is unboxing, and they're disinfecting everything. So everything that comes in the lab, we open up the boxes, we put them into pan numbers with the prescription, and inside the impression gets disinfected before entering the lab. So once it gets disinfected, it goes to customer service, where these ladies here are scheduling cases. So we have our system that we have all of our customers that will schedule what product needs to be made, what office it belongs to, and there's a work ticket that gets applied and then goes into the prep department. So this is the prep department, or model department. This department is where they're actually mixing the stone and pouring it in the impressions and giving us those articulated models that I was on earlier. Then it goes through quality assurance. it goes to quality assurance. Quality assurance is basically QCing the work in. If there's distortions on the impressions, sometimes there's holes and things that are not visible. David here would be making a phone call and talking to doctors and getting making sure that everything's working well before we start working on the case. This is our CAD department. CAD/CAM department is a department where our technology is changing. So a lot of our process and a lot of the products we make are digital now. And it consists of scanning models. It consists of designing these crowns. Instead of somebody designing it by hand, they're designing it on a computer, and they're designing the crown, and then it goes to a milling machine. So right here is where they're actually have the models on a screen, got scanned in. Then these guys here are actually designing the crown on a computer screen. You'll see the bridges there. From here it goes to a printing room. So when the models, some of the models that come in, instead of being those impressions, I kind of mentioned it before, some of them are digital. So now some doctors are getting these scanners. So instead of taking an impression of your mouth, it's a camera that they put in your mouth, and it takes all these pictures inside your mouth and stitches together and gives a 3D image of the patient. And that gets sent digitally, but then we need a model to work on it. So what these printers are doing are printing those models. Instead of pouring stone, printing models. And there's other things we can start printing now with night guards. The milling room, what they're doing is milling crowns. So when the designer designed a crown, it goes into these mills, and it's actually milling the crown, and it gets sintered, which means it's fired. Apologies for that. And it gets fired before the ceramic. Perfect Smile department. This is something that you may have heard of, Invisalign. So it's the same thing. It's an aligner. Basically, instead of braces, they plan and they move the teeth, and they print these different models that start pushing the teeth into place slowly. And basically, you can't really see it. It's just these plastic trays that they make. And that's all done here. So this is just our version of it. It's called Perfect Smile. So this is the ortho department. So ortho department is where they do the ortho appliances, and dentures is next to them, where they set up teeth. So in dentures, it's a little bit different. We don't design individual crowns like we do crown and bridge. Dentures, you buy a card of teeth, and they have different shapes. And with that card, you're using this pink wax, and you're setting up the teeth, and they go to the dental offices for try-ins. Basically, you try it in wax. Once everything's good and approved, it comes back to us, and we process that into acrylic. And that's what a denture looks like essentially after. So this room is polished. So they're polishing acrylic, or they're polishing night guards with pumice. This is the PFN and implant department. So traditional way of doing crowns, the process is they actually wax up a coping first. A coping is a structure. So imagine a skeleton. They wax it up, and they invest it, and they burn it out. Burning it out is when they put it in a furnace, and it melts all the wax out, and it leaves this copy or negative copy of what the wax up looked like. And they heat up metal and cast into it. And from that, they break apart that crucible, and they trim the metal, and it goes to the porcelain department where they apply porcelain. These processes that I'm talking about, if you go to our YouTube channel, shawlabgroup.com, there's actually some videos that show the steps on it, but it's a little bit more technical. So if you want to understand a little bit more technical of what I'm explaining it, you can get a better understanding there. This is the ceramic department. So this department is where they're applying porcelain. So let me see if I can grab it. Oh, sorry. Let me see if it actually shows the ceramics building up here. So over here is a porcelain tray. And what ceramics is it's essentially the same way you have a cup. It's to make glass, it's sand that's fired. And when it's fired at high temperatures, it turns into glass. And that's what they're essentially doing. There's on this tray here, there's different powders of sand and different colors. And they build up on top of that metal frame that I told you, they build up like little sand castles, but they're shape of teeth. And then they fire it. And then when it comes out of these furnaces, the glass, it looks like a tooth. It shrinks. It looks a little bit shape of a tooth. And then they have to do another buildup of sand on top of it. And they fire it again. And then once that's done, it usually takes about 2 bakes. They trim and glaze it, but at the end of it, it looks like a tooth and the color looks like a tooth. And then it goes to shipping and receiving. So there's like a final QC check of all the products going out, but it goes to basically these guys that are packing the boxes, ready to ship out back to the dental office. So I know there's a bunch of questions and answers that we're going to go into, and I can explain a little bit more about different things of dental technology. So do you guys want to, do I stop sharing the screen now?
Yes, please. Yeah. So then we
Yeah.
can see everyone.
Okay, I think Shamim has the questions and she can ask them.
Mhm.
You're muted.
Sorry, my bad. Hello. Yes, I do have them. Okay, so I wanted to firstly ask, you did talk about it a little bit, about why you wanted to like sort of go into dental lab tech and like how old you were.
Yeah.
But if there's any like interesting facts about getting into it and like when you were first entry level that you wanted to like further explain, I'd love to hear that.
So I'll explain a little bit why I chose to get in the profession in general. So personally, most people don't know what dental technology is. They usually have a friend or family member that's in it. My dad is an RDT. My mom works for the University of Toronto at the Faculty of Dentistry. My aunts work at the Faculty of Dentistry. My grandmother works at the Faculty of Dentistry. So I grew up, actually walking like 5-6-year-old, walking those halls at the University of Toronto. I would go to my dad and he's working at the lab bench doing his work. I was very exposed to that. So that was one reason, is that I grew up in an environment. I mean, afterwards, my life now is even more entangled into it because my wife is an RDT as well. So I met her through school. We worked together for a bit. Now she works for the University of Toronto in a dental lab there. But essentially my life was all involved around this environment and I grew up in it. But the other part of it is that I've always been very artistic. I love to paint, draw. And when it came, like I was done high school and, the question is like, you're trying to decide what is your career path. The question was, it was literally actually my mom at the time, she was like, what are you going to do? And she's like, well, why don't you do what your dad does? Right. And I'm like, well, I do like working with my hands and, I do love that work environment. So I kind of knew what it was. So I got into it and, I did my 3 years of school. I started actually working at Shaw, like I said, before going to school, which I found gave me a big advantage because when I was in school, I kind of knew already how to do everything. So the speed was there. My learning was a lot easier versus if most of the students, they go to first year, second year, third years when they do co-op. actually, some of them haven't even stepped in the lab until their third year. And in that program, you actually have students that, do first and second year. They go doing their co-op in third year and find out, what, this is not what I wanted to do. Like, it's not what I envisioned. It wasn't really, I didn't think I was going to be sitting at a desk all day doing the same thing or doing something similar, or maybe they didn't have the hands for it. So it's good, I think it's good seeing what doing this type of webinar and understanding, what we do. So it gives you a better understanding what dental technology is before you're, spend 2 years into school and then decide on your third year that this is not for you. But essentially that's kind of, why I got into the profession. So I think that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much. I know Sarah has a question, so I'm gonna pass it over to her.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering, you mentioned the handwork, and I was wondering with the advancement of technology, have you noticed whether there was a decrease in that, or is it the same thing?
Yeah, so the industry is changing quite rapidly lately. From traditional impressions in the dental office where they can use these camera to scan to what we're doing. So for example, the prep department, now you can do it, like I said, you can print models from, instead of that implant department where they're waxing, they can actually design it on a computer. The only area that's still not digitalized yet is that ceramic department. They still need the finishing touch. There's still either porcelain buildup or some sort of stain on it, because we do have a new product that's called zirconia, and it's basically a white crown. So that's what those mills are actually doing. Sometimes you can either layer it with porcelain, or it already comes the full shape of a tooth, and somebody's just glazing it, making it shiny. So it's a little bit different. So, and even dentures now. So dentures has been like very archaic in the sense of the process until recently, where we can do digital dentures. So we can actually design it on the computer and either print it or mill it and put the teeth in and have a whole digital process. So some labs are fully digital. Most are not a lot of doctors. I would say about 20% of our doctors are sending digital scans. So it's still a lot of it is done by hand. But in the lab, like I said, even if a doctor doesn't have a scanner, we have scanners that we digitalize them, and we may be doing a digital workflow versus an analog workflow, depending on what product we're making. Does it eliminate it doesn't eliminate the jobs in the sense of this technology that's coming, is that we found we actually have to hire more people because you need more people to run this equipment. It's just a different skill set. So maybe like what we find is that now we're hiring more people with just computer skills, like somebody that has AutoCAD background, or they have their printer in their basement that they've done 3D rendering and stuff like that. They actually work in the CAD department now. So now it's kind of a mixture of, you have an artistic hand, people that like being artistic with their hands, and there's also a mixture of people that love just sitting at the computer and working with computers. So there is a big difference in the profession, and lots of different jobs that you can do.
And one other question related to the same topic. I know of machines like CAD/CAM and Cerac, and do you think they would ever replace the work of a lab technician?
Yeah, so I don't know if everybody knows about it. So Cerac, what it is, it's basically a CAD machine. So a dentist now can basically scan the patient, design a crown, and they have a desktop milling machine that mills it, and then they can sinter it and finish it. Now, meaning they can do this workflow, but what we found in the profession is that it's one of those things. Either a dentist is very tech savvy and wants to do that and enjoys doing that, or most of the scenario is that, you know, there's as a dentist, you make more money doing different things. So, you know, for example, I can, as a manager, you know, in this lab, I can clean the floors. But does it make sense for me to clean the floors so I don't have to hire somebody to do the cleaning? No, I make more money doing what I do, and I'll hire a cleaner to do what they do, right? It's a little bit of the same. So at first, it does become like this whole technology niche that is kind of put onto doctors. But then they start realizing that, you know what, they don't really want to be sitting at a computer designing a crown, having to sinter it. And then the other factor, there's factors that they don't think about, is like the training that's involved to know how to design a crown, to mill it. You know, you train your staff to do that, because that's the other thing. So now, you know, they train their staff to do it. But when there's turnover, the staff leaves, now you have to retrain that staff. The other factor is these machines require a lot of maintenance and upkeep. So if you're not constantly maintaining it, they come down. Now, you know, the patient's there, you know, you don't have somebody else to kind of fix it. You can't make that product. The other thing is lab support. They don't have, when you're milling your own, you don't have that technician that you can call and be like, hey, listen, I'm in a jam. What can you do? Can you help me? What's your expertise? I mean, there's more things that we can do in the lab. So, and even that CEREC, you can only mill a certain type of products and certain sizes. Like you can't really mill a full arch or something. So there's limitations of what you can do on that. And they're nice, but they're not as, like, I think a ceramist that, you know, does this every day can do a way better job in creating something than that machine. Although technology is changing and machines are getting better, but I still think at the end of the day, there's a lot of dentists right now that are selling those. They bought CERECs, you know, they found out it's not really for my workflow, so they end up selling it. Now, just on that, there is another option for dentists, right? They don't necessarily have to send to a large lab like us. There's an option to open up your own lab in your office. So some of these doctors are opening up, they hire a technician that works for them in their office, and they have a furnace and they have this, and they do it. And that's a great option too, because then you actually have control over your technician. But at the end of the day, it's still a technician, whether you're sending to a big lab or smaller. And even those dentists that have a smaller lab, they still have a larger lab they send some work to. Most doctors don't send to one lab, they send to 2 or 3, because there's every lab has their strength. Every lab can do a different amount of work. So usually they send to different products to different places.
Thank you. Thank you.
I had another question that I wanted to ask you. So how do we as future dentists collaborate well with dental technicians? And what are your expectations with like said collaboration? Like, how does the interaction usually go between dentists and lab technicians with projects and like whatnot?
Good question. So I actually have a whole webinar on this, but the relationship between a dentist and a technician is really the crucial point on being successful. And it does start by understanding or treating your technician or your lab as part of your team. So there is a lot of dentists out there that, you know, treat a lab as just a manufacturing place. It's just a place I send my work to, they send it back, I put it in, right? But there's another way to treat your lab as part of your team, where you involve them more, meaning communication is the biggest thing, right? So when you're sending, like I have some doctors that, you know, they send work, they will actually even come here sometimes to actually look at their cases, talk about their patients one-on-one. Hey, you know, I have this complicated patient. No, Mike, what do you think we should do this? What do you think is the best product? Or what are my options, right? They start getting opinions from the lab, because you got to remember, like our lab, we have about over 300 doctors. I mean, a day we probably pump out, you know, to 200 units a day of porcelain units of crowns. We get to see a lot. We get to see what works and what doesn't work, right? So we're not chair side as much, but we get an understanding of what's successful and not. So involving your lab and asking them, what their opinion is. How are the other thing is impression taking or scanning, right? Sometimes when you're taking impression, there's things like distortion. Distortion is basically you can take impression, and when we pour up a model, it's not the same as what the patient has in their mouth. It's different. And when we make a product, all we have is that model. So there's times that if the impression's not good or a scan is not good, we make a product on that model, and then when it goes to final insert, the product doesn't fit the mouth. And it comes again about that communication. Like, not everybody likes to hear bad news, but asking your lab, hey, what do you think of my impression? Is it good? Is it bad? I want you to call me anytime that there's an issue with that impression. I want you to call me and tell me, take a new impression, right? Some doctors don't. Some doctors don't want to hear that. They don't want their lab calling them saying, hey, there's a problem with your impression. It ends up being a personal thing. And as lab technicians, we really don't like making those calls because it kind of, you're working with somebody and it sucks to give bad news, and it sucks to say, hey, something that you did is not correct. But some doctors welcome it, and the ones that do, that's where you have this communication. And also being that doctor that communicates good or bad news. Usually, there's a saying in dental technology, no news is good news. The only time you get a phone call is if something wrong happens. But there are doctors that provide good feedback with bad feedback. So taking photos of the patient, of whatever we make in the mouth, sending it back, whether it's good or bad. Because what we do is as managers or supervisors, we give the technicians feedback. You got to remember, we don't get to, the technician that builds that crown doesn't see the patient. They're just looking at a model. And when they get to see the patient, the crown in the mouth, in their mind, either it's perfect and they're like, wow, I did a good job, or there's something that, I could have done better next time. And what it does, it improves that. So I guess to answer your question is, if you work with your lab that is part of your team, and in the sense that you're trying to make your lab better, and the workflow of the lab works with your workflow, and you work to improve on that, that what makes you very successful. But if you treat a lab as just another manufacturer that I send my work to and I get it back, and there's a disconnect there, that's why things are not as successful. Hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much. Before I get into Sarah's hand, I just wanted to ask, like, when it comes to distortions with impressions and like the work that the dentist has to do before sending it over to the lab, like, let's say like if I was a dentist and I did a terrible impression and I'm sending it over to you and you guys make that product and send it back to me and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, this actually doesn't fit the patient's mouth. Do I still have to like basically like give you like the payment like basically for your service still and then ask for a new impression, or would you still like compensate for the new one even though the first one was bad,
So good question. Different labs have different policies. So there are some labs that will be like, bad impression, your fault. It's a remake now. We're charging you again for it. Actually, probably most labs are like that. We don't here. We do it a little bit differently. So what we'll do is like, we remake things at no charge, because at the end of the day, it's a patient, it's a doctor, we're trying to do it. And I think what ends up happening when you get in this argument of whose fault is it, whether it's the lab fault or doctor's fault, it ends up being this argument with a customer. And at the end of the day, there's a patient there that we got to remember, right? And it's not about whose fault is it. It's about what are we doing for that patient and what do we do to make it successful? Because at the end of the day, I don't want my doctor having multiple try-ins and they look bad in front of the patients, and we don't want to have multiple issues and look bad. So essentially what we do with our customers is we give feedback. We try to work with them to improve stuff like that. If it is a remake, we remake it at no charge. But But we do at the end of the day, at the end of the year, like we evaluate that, like we monitor how many remakes we have. And sometimes we might have a discussion. Listen, doc, either like, there's your remake percentages is this much. For us to work with you, we don't want to have to remake so much. I don't want you to have to remake so much because it's a lot of your chair time too. So this is what we have to do to improve our relationship, and we have to do this, this, and this. Are you willing to do that? And if they are, then we work on that. And sometimes they're not, and they go to a different lab, and that's what it is. And at the end of the day, it works out, right? But that's kind of our view on that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah now.
I found it so interesting when you said giving the bad news when there's a distortion. I work at a front desk at an office, and every time I get a call from a lab saying we need a new impression, I also hate giving that news to the patient because they have to come in the office. So I know exactly what that bad news feels like. I also had a question regarding, I think you mentioned somewhere in between, like earlier you said, night guards increasing. And I'm wondering, you said we're making night guards more specifically these days, something along these lines. And I'm wondering, have you noticed any trends in any other, because I would assume night guards with stress, but have you noticed any other trends in any other appliances?
No, so definitely you see a lot of night guards increasing. And obviously maybe it's just the times. People are more stressed out, grinding their teeth. Even myself, I'm a heavy grinder. And dentistry is becoming more preventative dentistry. You don't want to have to come here. You don't want to have to restore your crown. You don't want to have to prep and put an implant or lose all your teeth and have a denture. So that's why we're brushing our teeth more. That's why we're trying to take care of your teeth, right? So there's more, because people are more going on to preventative dentistry. That's why there's more night guards being made as well, right? It's just, it's going to save your teeth. Like before, I don't think we really view that as much. And people grind their teeth, and once you start grinding it too much, then you're going to have to get a crown. And then after a crown, get older, you might get leakage, and then it turns into a bigger crown, and then it turns into an implant. Then you end up being into a denture. So definitely, I see an increase on night guards. The other thing is just more implants, I guess. People are understanding the benefits of an implant versus a bridge. And maybe I probably should describe that, why that is the case. If you lose a tooth, you have an empty space. You either have, you have a couple of options. You can make a denture, but then you have a denture that comes in and out all the time. You can make a bridge. And what a bridge does is like you have to prep 2 good teeth that are beside that empty spot, and you make 3 crowns. But the problem is that every time anytime a dentist preps or grinds, you're destroying perfectly healthy teeth. And again, eventually that can end up being problems down the road. So, and the other thing is that spot that the tooth is missing, because the bone in that spot doesn't have a root anymore, the bone starts to shrink and you end up with the gaps there. So food will start getting in there. It's hard to clean. So long-term, you start having issues with that. With a dental implant, they put basically, like I said, a screw, but it's an implant into your bone, and the bone grows around it, and the bone thinks it's a root, so it doesn't shrink as much. And then you don't have to, you just make 1 crown. You don't have to prep 2 good teeth that are next to it. So they're more expensive, but I think they're more affordable options now with digital technology, because before with implants, we had to use a lot of gold. It was a lot of waxing and casting, and you have to cast in gold. Now with the digital workflow, there's custom titanium abutments, there's zirconia, which is cheaper. So it's cheaper to get an implant crown than it was before. So implants are increasing as well.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to pass it over to Rustin. He has a question now.
Okay, so my question is about management style. I want to know how a dentist or RDT can like establish their own laboratory? What's the requirements? Do they need to like participate in the ownership or no? How that's gonna work?
Okay, so let me first start off about explain what an RDT is. So an RDT is a registered dental technologist. You do not need to be an RDT to work in a lab. So to become an RDT, you have to go to George Brown, do your 3 years, and then you can apply and write, it's a 1-week exam, hands-on exam, and you can become an RDT if you pass. But you can have no experience at all, and I can hire you for a position and I can train you to do that. And under an RDT supervision, it's okay. So you can be a technician, you're just not a registered dental technician or technologist. So to work in a lab, you don't have to be an RDT. To own a lab, you do not have to be an RDT. So you can, the only thing that you need is that you have to have at least one RDT that is working at that lab that checks the work and stamps the invoices. So there's a stamp that validates that an RDT was supervising that case and validated that that product is safe for patients and it's made it correctly and it's going out. And essentially that RDT is responsible. But that RDT doesn't have to be the owner. So you can essentially open a lab, hire an RDT to work for you, and that person would be responsible for everything. And the same thing. So essentially, that's the only reason you need an RDT is for that. The other thing is, you know, with becoming an RDT, like I said, you don't have to do it, but there is benefits to it, like the knowledge and the courses that you're learning. It allows you to do more. It opens up your doors. It gives you more options because essentially, if you're being trained for a position, you're just doing that same position. At least an RDT knows a little bit, like you're actually learning how to do ortho, learning how to do dentures, learning how to do crown and bridge, where a technician just may be hired for doing printing. Your job is just to clean the printer every day or to just design a crown or to whatever it is. So it gives you more options becoming an RDT. Oh, the other thing is when you become an RDT, most labs, like I said, are smaller labs. So you're talking about 2 or 3 man labs. So they get their license and they open a lab either in their basement or they open a lab in a small little warehouse, a unit or something like that. And they only have a handful of doctors, 5-10 doctors that they work for. So that is an option. So if you want to be self-employed, that's a way to do that as well, but you don't need to.
I have a follow-up question too. How many people right now are working at Shaw Labs company in total, like in all of the branches around Canada?
I don't have that. It's 130 something. I don't have the exact number, but it's about 130 something. And we're based out of Ontario.
Great, thank you.
I also had a question. I wanted to ask, where do you see this field in the next 10 years?
So good question. I see it not change. It's going to change more, but becoming more, like I said, digital. I see most of those offices in 10 years are not doing traditional impressions, that they're using scanners. I think most labs are going to, I think there's going to be a change in the dynamics of labs. So I think larger labs like us, the thing is when you're a larger labs, you can start affording this expensive machinery, these mills, these printers, the technology. You know, being that 1 or 2 man lab, it ends up being very costly to invest to that. And I think when dentists start becoming more tech savvy and the industry is all digital, I think you're going to have less smaller labs, or let me rephrase that. You're going to have probably less medium-sized labs. You either have larger labs or what we call as boutique labs. And a boutique lab, there's still a niche for that. A boutique lab is literally a 1 or 2 man lab that work with those doctors, but they develop that relationship and they do that extra. There's that extra care and extra service that goes into it that doctors still want as well. So there's still going to be that as well.
Thank you so much.
I have another question too. Is there any specific project or like interesting project that you're having in your lab right now that you think worth mentioning? A huge implant, a gold implant, something like that.
So I kind of alluded to it, like, so digital dentures right now is one big one that we're getting into. It's probably the last process that in the business that came a little bit later. But with the first digital dentures that came in, they didn't look the greatest. But now the materials look a lot better. So we're working on increasing the amount of types of digital dentures, partials and fulls that we're working on in the lab. So that would be like a denture project. But in general, there's always improvement projects that we're working everywhere. So in our lab, we do a lot of things. I'm not sure if you guys heard of lean manufacturing, but it's a Japanese concept of, and it's a Japanese concept that they use at Toyota, but it's basically constant improvement. And I guess a way to sum it up is it's a culture change, and a culture in most businesses a pyramid, right? And you have the employees at the bottom, you have their bosses, you have the manager, you have the owner, and it's a top-down decision making, right? So it's like, the owner wants this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And then when there's improvement ideas, the mentality of the employees, well, it's not my job, it's my supervisor's job. Supervisor's like, not my job, it's the manager's job, it's the owner's job, right? So what we do differently is that we're like an upside down pyramid. So meaning the person that's most closest to the customer is the employees. And the job of the supervisors is to support those employees, job as a manager to support those supervisors, and the job of the owner is to support the manager. When it comes down to decision making or project improvements, it's actually the employees, because they experience it and they know the most. And they're the ones that, oh, you know what, this needs to be fixed. And they actually get in groups together and problem solve. And we teach, and Lean, what Lean does, it teaches you problem solving skills, finding root cause analysis, how to solve them. And what happens is, instead of one brain at the top that's trying to figure out how to improve, you have 85 brains that are constantly trying to improve. So there's constantly improvement projects that are happening. And some are larger, some are smaller. But every day there's a step forward on that.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Lino, I wanted to ask you, in the past 20 years, what has been like some of your best memories, like working especially with Shaw Lab Group and just in your career wise as well?
So I think throughout my 20 years here, one thing is just enjoying the people. Like you gotta, like throughout the career, like you're always learning something. So when I started here, I started working in metals, a prep department, metals department. Then I worked in porcelain, then in dentures, and then I became denture supervisor, and then assistant manager, and then manager. But throughout that whole process, like there was always new skills that you're learning, and you're interacting with different people, and everybody has different ideas and different methods. And you kind of enjoy, like if you enjoy learning, you'll enjoy working at a lab because you're constantly learning different things and different techniques. So that was one big thing. The other thing, I mean, now we've, like, again, it's a little bit change in culture, but we like doing fun events, right? Like I mean, again, you can see it on Instagram, our Instagram account, but you know, in the middle of our lab, we have a foosball table, right? So we did a foosball tournament. You know, we had the board up, everybody kind of registered in, you know, we have a champion, but it's, you know, we made a social committee, and the social committee is responsible for events and stuff like that. But it's just a matter of having fun and making sure that you're happy working, and you know, you have fond memories of that, like just, you know, going to work and having fun, right? So you enjoy, it's just enjoying what you're doing, and at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. Like, it doesn't make sense doing something that you're not enjoying, right?
No, 100%. Like that's even like what my mom personally always tells me, like go towards things that you really enjoy in life because you're going to be working in it like for most of your life pretty much. So if you don't like it, then it's not really like as like easygoing or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you said like a lot of your family like was in dental lab technician and your wife also as well. So that's crazy to me and it's really cool actually. Do you have any advice for like any students who are motivated into going into this career path and how to like stay motivated in it or anything like that?
Yeah, like I think if you're interested in getting into the field, I think it's good to go to a lab. Like don't wait for co-op to go. You know, contact. I mean, it's not all labs are open and welcome. I mean, us, like if you guys want, send me an email. You know, do a lab tour. I don't really. For us, our doors have always been open. Some labs are not like that. They don't want to take the time to show people stuff, but finding, you know, just talking, I would say just if you're interested in, try to get to know somebody that is in the field, or if you don't know somebody that's in the field, just call up a lab and say, hey, you know, I'm interested in getting into profession. Do you mind me coming in, seeing, or getting to learn, or whatever it is, what you guys do, just get an understanding. And then I think once you're in, it's just a matter of finding what type of technician you want to be. And what I mean by that is there's different roles and different things that suit different people's needs. Meaning, you know, if you like computers, then maybe the best suited position for you is in the digital CAD/CAM department. If you like working with your hands, then maybe it's doing porcelain. If you're an introverted person, you know, you just want to come to work and put your headphones on and just do something. You know, there's jobs that we have or that they're just repetitive. People just come, they put their music on and they do it, but they're happy doing that. But there's also, if you're extroverted and you want to be that social thing, you can get in this profession, you can be a sales rep, you can be that person that, you know, works in a dental office that sees patients and that type of lab technician, right? If you're the person that's very ambitious and you want to be self-employed, you can work and become your own boss. The thing that I find with becoming a technician is that you're almost guaranteed like a job for you. So one thing to note is that technicians are very hard to find. Not too many people know what we're doing. I think actually it's one of the biggest challenges as we grow. It's very hard to find technicians. So what we end up doing is having to hire people that are not technicians and train them to be a position of that. So technicians are in demand. And what I find is that, like I said, like compared to other professions, most of my classmates, you know, they had a university degree in sociology, biology, and then they're very competitive industries. You know, you graduate, you have your degree, and you can't find a job in that field that you wanted to do. And then what they ended up doing is going back to school, go to college, and getting into it. So there was no problem finding a job, like because there's different aspects, and because you can become your own boss. There's job security there, and because there's a demand, if it doesn't work in one lab, you'll find a job in another lab. So I think that's one big thing about it.
Thank you so much. This whole webinar was really amazing, and I wanted to take the time to thank you again for joining us today and basically collaborating with Bright Future Dentists to share your experience and your knowledge and expertise with everything lab technician related. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us today. We had a really good turnout with our participants. And if you wanted to check out anything else and our past webinars or workshops, everything is on our YouTube channel and recorded on there, including this webinar. And thank you so much for taking the time to thoroughly answer all of our questions. I personally enjoyed it so much, and I learned so much from you especially. But yeah.
Thank you for, it was
Sorry.
yeah.
I think Zahra has some question.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
go.
that's my mom. She just wanted to say hi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Good, thank you. I can start my video. How you doing? I think we met at Everest Mile once. If you remember me, I don't expect you to remember me, but once I actually saw you here, I remember that I met you at Everest Mile. So anyways, I was actually surprised that these much number of people are motivated and very, very interested in dental program. And I'm really, really proud of all of them that they are actually talking about it. They are having clubs about it, and they are working on this path. And this is very, actually, I can say it's very admiring, because when I was at their age, I didn't even think about dentistry.
No. Oh, no, and I do love this group that you guys have going, because like I said, it's you're talking about it now and understanding what the field is about and getting into it. And like I said, we need more people. I mean,
yeah, it was really surprising for me that because I know them, I have met them, and I didn't know that they are participating in this webinar. And actually, and I'm very happy that they are working on it and they are in this path. Very nice, very nice. Thank you so much. That was great talking. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
And yeah, okay. Very nice to meet other people here in this webinar. Yeah, and hope to see you guys. Have a good night.
Good
You
night.
too.
Good
Yeah.
night. Thank you both for coming. Very nice to have you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your time as well.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Have a great night.
Bye,
Have
you
a
too.
great night.
Bye guys.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye-bye.